Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Migraine Mentors minicast with your hosts, the Migraine Mentors. I am Dr. Eric Rees. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Thompson Maisaka. Dr. Maisaka, how are you today there, sir?
I'm doing excellent today. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's sunny out. It's not too cold. We're supposed to get maybe snow tomorrow, but maybe not, so we can't really complain. This is honestly probably one of my favorite topics to talk about is migraine, mitochondria. And for those of you who have no idea what I just mentioned, we're going to talk to you about what that is today. So, Thompson, I know you do a ton of work with your patients who struggle with migraine and those that have chronic headaches and concussion. Why is cellular health and why are your cells so important for starting at the foundational component of helping somebody get through their symptoms?
Yeah, I go back to the thing that we all learned in middle school. I think most of us heard that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's like one of those 8 facts that we all just hold on to and kind of know the bare minimum about it. When it really comes down to it, looking at migraine as a condition with unstable cells it's really easy in that context to see why mitochondria is important. Because if you don't have good mitochondrial health, you don't have a very good your neurons are unstable, and neurons that are unstable typically tend to have that seizure-like cascade that we know as migraine. So I try and keep it as simple as just that. Is when you don't make good energy for the cells, they get fatigued quickly, and the faster they fatigue, the more quickly you're going to have a migraine come on. I'd be curious to see how that conversation goes with your patients as well.
It's one of those things where I don't really think patients really understand the importance of that until they really feel how slow or clumsy or how bad that they genuinely feel with their symptoms, right? And so I think there's always this elusive conversation of oh, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to make sure we do X, Y, and Z. But until they really feel that, then it's okay, this kind of hits home. And so, to be fair, a lot of the conversations we've had on here are really ones that I take home and use with patients. And so, one of the first ones is essentially listen, the whole focus of your cell is to support you, and you're actively breaking tissue down. You're actively building it back up. It's always this battle in tandem back and forth between building up and breaking down. And so your cells just take care of that. So if your Bob the Builder cell isn't doing its job, then, you're going to pay for it in some way, shape, or form. Outside of that, we don't really get too deep into any of that stuff until we really need to. And so um, when you're talking about mitochondria and specifically with migraine, I was taught that, your mitochondria produce energy. They produce ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. What we now know is that it regulates inflammation and it also regulates immune function. And so for a lot of people who struggle with migraine, I don't think that's surprising, but that whole inflammatory aspect is huge. And I know you do a lot of interesting protocols in the office with labs, nutrition to control inflammation. What are your go-to steps for that? I'd be curious to kind of hear more about that.
Yeah, the first test that we have talked about a lot on this channel is the Dutch test, just to make sure that the process of creating stress and managing stress and not having it cascade into a huge autonomic firestorm is a great place to start. It can give you a lot of good information in terms of how the mitochondrial health is and how generally how the cells themselves are functioning from a stability standpoint. And that usually goes into a conversation about different things that we can do to help the cells produce more energy. It's really hard to have the mitochondria talk without going into the autonomic talk. So I'll always remember one of the big sort of aha moments for me was I was watching one of my favorite people talk. Is a person you actually know very well. His name is Glenn Zielinski. He's a brilliant practitioner out of Oregon. And he lumped in migraine in his category under autonomic disorders. Up to that point, I had only known it as a headache disorder, and I kind of knew that that wasn't necessarily true just as a standalone. But then considering it as primarily autonomic dysfunction that leads to this huge attack was a huge breakthrough in understanding for me personally. And I've since talked to most of my migraine patients about that, because when you go into different ways to help your mitochondria produce better energy, one of the easiest, most well-researched ways is just to exercise. And exercise then creates a cellular environment where these things can produce more energy and in general will improve the autonomic health of the person. If you're listening and you don't know what autonomic health is, it's kind of like a seesaw between rest and digest and relaxation responses. And on the other half is stress responses. So when you have an accumulation of stress responses, the seesaw bottoms out on the stress side, and that's generally where a lot of health issues stem from, especially migraine. So that is the first conversation that we have in terms of what can I actually do to improve my mitochondrial health. And the answer is simply just very gradual exercise. You have to be really careful with that, especially if you're dealing with ongoing migraine and you have a lot of medications on board. You want to start slow and just build up your tolerance to it. But in terms of things you can do for free that will immediately impact your autonomic system and your mitochondrial health, that's the first, most logical place to start. I'd be curious to hear where you start with your patients.
Yeah, exercise for me is fundamental and foundational, but after that, it's usually the conversation about sleep. So I think people understand why they need to sleep. They understand the effects or benefits from it, but there are so many aspects of sleep that can help literally like balance your blood sugar and help you lose weight. That's a great one that everyone loves. Sleep can be massively influential for your mental health, for your physical health. We know sleep can help you consolidate memories, but talking about that instability of those cells and of those neurons, like sleep is just so restorative for every cellular function that we know about. And so when you skimp sleep, or when you're not sleeping very well, then what we know is that all of those aspects are going to be affected in some way, shape, or form. So I'm usually having the sleep conversation with people, and it's not as easy to say, oh, well, you should just sleep more or you should sleep better, because most of the patients that we see are already trying to do that. It's talking to them about, okay, well, tell me about your sleep habits, right? Are you somebody who watches Netflix before you go to bed? That's obviously an issue. Are you somebody who has like stressful conversations with your partner 10, 20 minutes before you go to sleep because that's the only time you can talk to them at night? Like maybe we change that protocol up. Like it's about the habits that they have or don't have to really try and refine that. And you can get into nutrition and supplements, but I usually don't start there because I just don't think you can out supplement your way out of bad habits on the sleep. So once the exercise conversation is had, we go down the sleep path. What's your next phase? Is there anything else that you go after that?
I think from there it's more targeted neurologic examination, so we can just a simple version of what Dr. Reese and I do in the clinic is we have assessments for pretty much every portion of your nervous system, and if we find abnormalities or findings somewhere and the function of that area correlates to the symptoms that you're experiencing, we need to improve the mitochondrial and autonomic health and just cellular health in general of those target tissues. So if we find a super common area in migraine is something called the midbrain. So it's very briefly, you look up and down, near and far. And if you're sensitive to light and sound, if you have a bunch of different symptoms that correspond to an area called your midbrain, we know we need to do things, targeted therapies to go in and stabilize that area of your nervous system because it's causing you symptoms. And so in that sense, neurologic rehab can become a great vehicle to improve this mitochondrial health just by targeting it and activating it until it starts to strengthen itself. It's pretty much the same process as lifting weights. It's just you do it for areas of the brainstem and up into the brain as well. In the context of what we do, that's logically the next step that we go to. As soon as we make sure there's nothing going on under the hood, then we just figure out which areas of your brain are causing you symptoms, which you can actually really easily find out just by asking people what they feel when they're having an attack. So if they say, oh, I get super light and sound sensitive and I get really dizzy, for us, that tells us exactly where the issue is, and that makes our job a lot easier to go in and start activating that tissue to make it stabilize itself.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of really good points about that. And one, I think just that continues to get reiterated is the fact that there really is no like sham cookie cut approach to treating migraine or even concussion or any conditions that we commonly see. You have to be personalized. Everyone's different, and the way your symptoms manifest is different. The way you get triggered by specific things is different. I mean, there's just so many aspects. I was writing this week's blog post, and I was just going into being like, hey, what does like a healthy diet look like for a lot of people? And one of the suggestions was like, oh, you should have avocados and like healthy fats and things like that. Well, avocados for somebody who struggles with migraine might be a bad idea because avocados are super high in histamine. And so if you have mast cell activation syndrome or you have histamine intolerances, you eating an avocado, which theoretically like should be healthy for you, could actually really flare you up and cause issues. So The things that we think we know or things that we think are healthy can sometimes really need to be considered with a bit of a caveat on that side. So Dr. Maisaka, with that said, I mean, there's a lot to be said about eating well, sleep well, moving well. Like for somebody out there who's struggling, who wants to get started, or somebody who has started and they want to continue going, like what are some suggestions for them so we can just kind of close this out on the ending of an action item?
Yeah, I would say go. If you need hope, if you're out there and you're just completely exhausted, go read some of our reviews. A lot of those people were in situations that they've tried everything they could possibly think of, years and years, and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars of care. And all it took was someone that was willing to just sit and listen and put the pieces together and put together a logical plan that addressed the lowest hanging fruit and just work through it together. If you need that type of support, just email us, give us a call. We're not going to try and sell you anything. We're not going to try and make you fly here if you're not from here. We'll just listen and give you our honest opinion. Sometimes, it blows my mind, Eric. It blows my mind that the thing that everyone in our clinic really embodies very strongly is we just deeply care and we're empathetic and we listen. I never thought that would make us stand out because I thought that was just a prerequisite that everyone in medicine just had, and that how smart you are and how accurately you were able to, tell people what to do is what made you stand out. I've had so many people say, like, everyone just kind of writes me off and they just kind of get me out of their office as fast as possible, and no one actually sits and listens. And that blows my mind. I can't believe that's where we are. And so we promise, if you're struggling, give us a call. We'll listen. We'll give you our honest suggestion based on what we think is going to help you now. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with us. And just give us a call. We promise that we'll give you it straight and honest. And, hopefully by the end of that conversation, we'll give you resources and just hope, because we've seen these people. We've seen people in your situation time and time again, kind of get what the deal is. And if you're hesitant, just reach out. If you have questions, please. We'll definitely make it worth your time.
Well, and to add on top of that too, you don't have to be in Minnesota to reach out to us. We get calls from all over the U.S. We get calls from people all over the place who are just looking for answers. Calls this week. I've talked to people in Utah. I've talked to people in Washington, South Dakota, of course, Minnesota. And Thompson, I'm sure there's calls that I don't even know about that you've taken, right? And so people are just looking for answers and they're desperate. And so what we've just tried to do is just be honest, real. And I just carry the same mentality of if you were a family member of mine or you were my grandparent, I want somebody to help you. And I like to think that somebody else would do the same for me if I needed to get put back together as well. And so I think it's a great point for us to end on. If you have any questions or you have any concerns, call the clinic, call our office. We'll put our information in the notes. If you are a subscriber to the Migraine Mentors newsletter, thank you for supporting us. We can't thank you enough. We appreciate it. And we get emails all the time from people who are just grateful to be a part of our community. And if you aren't a subscriber to the Migraine Mentors newsletter, what are you waiting for? If you're somebody who's struggling, if you want some free, options and education on how to take care of yourself in an integrative, holistic perspective to help you manage all the things you're dealing with, we're giving it to you for free. We don't charge for it. We just want to get this out into the world and share what we know. So thank you for joining us today. Come find us again next week, same time, same place. And if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, just go to the description in the YouTube video. Everything's going to be in there for you to sign up. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next time.